The night had settled gently over Blackwood Castle. It did not arrive suddenly. It never did. Instead, it crept slowly across the stone walls and towers, softening their edges beneath a sky hidden behind thin, drifting clouds. The wind moved quietly above the battlements, brushing past old stone and weathered banners, carrying with it the faint scent of the forest that stretched beyond the castle grounds. Most of the castle had already fallen into sleep. The great hall fires had faded into dull embers. Windows were dark. Doors were closed. Even the guards along the outer walls moved with slow and careful steps, their voices quiet, their lanterns small points of light against the vast stillness of the night. But high above the sleeping courtyards, one place remained awake, the Raven Tower. It stood at the northern edge of the castle, rising slender and tall beside the outer wall. Its stones were darker than the rest of the castle, worn smooth by years of wind and weather. Narrow windows circled the upper chamber, and from those openings the faint rustle of feathers could sometimes be heard. Inside the tower, the ravens waited, and so did their keeper. Aldrich climbed the spiral stairs slowly, one hand resting lightly against the cool stone wall as he ascended. In his other hand he carried a lantern, its warm flame swaying gently with each step. The light did not travel far in the narrow stairwell, but it did not need to. Aldrich knew the tower well. He had walked these steps every night for many years. Step, pause, step. The stone beneath his boots was worn by countless passes. The rhythm of the climb had become something familiar, something steady and unchanging. Outside the narrow arrow slits, the wind whispered softly, but within the tower, the air remained calm. Higher and higher he climbed, until at last a stairway opened into the round chamber at the top of the tower. Here the ravens lived. Wooden perches lined the circular walls. Small cages rested beside them, though most remained open, for the birds were accustomed to the tower and rarely wandered far. The faint scent of feathers and straw filled the air, mingling with the cold breath of the night, drifting through the narrow windows. As Aldrich stepped inside, the ravens stirred, not loudly, not suddenly, just small movements, feathers shifting, wings adjusting against the quiet air. The birds knew him. Aldrich set the lantern upon a small wooden table near the center of the chamber. Its glow spread gently across the room, touching the perches one by one, illuminating dark shapes resting in stillness. One raven tilted its head, another blinked slowly. A third ruffled its feathers before settling once more. No cawing, no restless wings. Oh, the soft presence of birds awake in the night. Aldrich moved among them slowly, his steps quiet against the wooden floor. From a small sack he took a handful of feed and placed it carefully into the shallow bowls set beside each perch. The ravens watched him with calm black eyes. Step, pause, step. He had followed this same routine for many years. Each night he climbed the tower. Each night he checked the perches. Each night he counted the birds. Routine had a way of settling the mind, of keeping the world simple. Aldrich paused beside the first perch. One raven. It remained still as he passed. He moved to the next. Two. The lantern light flickered softly against glossy feathers. Three. Another raven shifted its wings before returning to quiet rest. Four. The wind outside the tower whispered past the windows. 5. A feather drifted slowly to the floor. 6. The birds breathed quietly, their small movements blending into the silence of the chamber. 7. Aldrich continued his slow walk around the circular room. 8, 9, 10, 11, and finally 12. He stopped. For a moment Aldrich remained still. A lantern flame flickered softly beside him. The ravens rested upon their perches, their dark forms barely moving in the dim light. The tower felt calm, just as it always did at this hour. 12 ravens. There had always been 12. Aldrich turned slowly, allowing his gaze to drift once more around the chamber. 1, 2, 3. Each bird rested where it should. Nothing disturbed the quiet. Nothing had changed. And yet, for the briefest moment, something reached his ears. Not a cry, not the sound of wings, something softer, a faint movement of air. Like feathers brushing gently against the night, Aldrich lifted his head slightly. Ravens remained still. None had moved. None had taken flight. The tower was quiet. He listened. The wind whispered outside the narrow windows. The lantern flame shifted slightly. And then, very softly, another sound. A single, quiet beat of wings. Aldrich did not move. He did not turn. Instead, he stood where he was, allowing the silence to settle once more. The ravens remained calm. None stirred. None seemed troubled. And yet, beneath the stillness of the tower, beneath the quiet rhythm of the night, there lingered something else, something that did not belong to the 12 ravens resting upon their perches. Aldrich lowered his gaze slowly. The lantern's glow drifted across the wooden floor, across the scattered feathers, across the quiet shadows between the perches. Nothing was there. The chamber remained just as it had always been, still, silent, unchanged. And yet, as Aldrich turned to begin his rounds again, he became quietly aware of something behind him, not close, not threatening, just present, somewhere within the dim corners of the tower. A 13th wingbeat had joined the night, soft, steady, and unseen. The night deepened around Blackwood Castle. Without anyone noticing, it rarely announced itself. Instead, it settled quietly across the stone towers and sleeping courtyards, darkening the sky above the walls, and softening every sound that moved through the air. Within the castle, almost everything had grown still. The guards along the battlements had slowed their patrols. Their lanterns moved slowly between the towers, small drifting lights against the vast quiet of the walls. In the great hall below, the last embers of the evening fire glowed faintly beneath a layer of ash. Even the wind seemed to pass more gently now. But high above the silent courtyard, the Raven Tower remained awake. Inside the chamber, the lantern still burned upon the small wooden table where Aldrich had placed it earlier in the night. Its flame had grown smaller now, steadier, casting a warm and patient glow that reached across the round walls and the quiet shapes of the resting birds. The ravens had not moved much. Some remained perched with their heads tucked gently beneath their wings. Others sat upright, their dark eyes half open, watching the slow movements of their keeper as he continued his quiet routine. Aldrich walked the circular path around the chamber once more. Step, pause, step. The wooden floor creaked faintly beneath his boots, though the sound was soft enough to disappear almost as soon as it began. He paused beside the first perch. The raven resting there remained still, its feathers smooth and dark in the lantern light. Aldrich placed a few more grains into the shallow bowl beside it. The bird did not move. He continued. Step, pause, step. At the second perch, another raven lifted its head slightly as he approached. Its eyes reflected the lantern's glow for a moment, before slowly closing again. Nothing restless, nothing unusual, only the quiet rhythm of birds accustomed to the night. Aldrich continued along the circle. 3, 4, 5. Each raven rested in its place, their bodies calm, their breathing slow and steady. The chamber felt peaceful, the kind of quiet that came from long familiarity. The lantern flame flickered once, sending the shadows along the walls shifting gently for a moment before settling again. Aldrich stopped beside the sixth perch. The raven there had not cocked its head beneath its wing like the others. Instead, it sat upright, its gaze directed toward one of the narrow windows high along the tower wall, not toward Aldrich, toward the darkness beyond the tower. Aldrich followed its gaze. Outside the window, the night stretched endlessly across the forest. The clouds above drifted slowly, hiding the stars, leaving the land beyond the castle walls dark and quiet. Nothing moved, nothing disturbed the stillness. After a moment, the raven lowered its head again and returned to rest. Aldrich continued his round. Step, pause, step, 7, 8, 9. The ravens remained calm. Their feathers rustled softly whenever one shifted slightly on its perch, but the sound was gentle, barely noticeable against the quiet breath of the tower. Aldrich moved toward the final section of the chamber. 10, 11. He stopped beside the last perch. 12. The raven there watched him quietly. For a moment, Aldrich rested his hand lightly upon the wooden frame beside the perch. The wood felt smooth and worn beneath his fingers, shaped by many years of routine and care. Everything appeared as it should be. The same 12 ravens, the same quiet chamber, the same steady lantern light. And yet, something lingered within the tower, a softness beneath the silence. A feeling almost too faint to notice. Aldrich turned slowly, allowing his gaze to move once more around the circular room. 1, 2, 3. The birds remained exactly where they had been before. 4, 5, 6. Nothing disturbed them. 7, 8, 9. The lantern flame burned steadily. 10, 11, 12. He stopped again. For a long moment, Aldrich simply stood there. The ravens remained still. The air within the tower felt calm. But then, one of the birds moved. Not quickly, not suddenly. The raven resting near the far window lifted its head and turned slightly, its gaze fixed upon something behind Aldrich. Not on the lantern, not on the door to the stairwell, but the narrow space between two empty perches along the far wall. Aldrich did not turn immediately. Instead, he listened. The tower held its silence. No wings moved. No bird cried out. The raven continued watching at empty space. Its posture remained calm. Its feathers did not rise in alarm. It simply watched. Slowly, Aldrich lifted the lantern from the table. The light swayed gently as he turned. The glow spread across the wooden floor, across the base of the perches, across the quiet chamber walls. Nothing stood there. The space between the perches remained empty, only shadow, only stillness. Aldrich lowered the lantern slightly. The light softened. The raven near the window blinked once, then slowly tucked its head beneath its wing again. The moment passed. The chamber returned to its quiet rhythm. Aldrich placed the lantern back upon the table. The flame steadied once more. Step, pause, step. He resumed his walk around the chamber. The ravens remained calm. The wind whispered outside the tower windows. Everything seemed unchanged. And yet, as Aldrich reached the far side of the chamber again, something caught his attention. One of the cages along the wall stood slightly open. He slowed. The cage door moved gently with the faint movement of air, creaking almost silently against its iron hinge. Aldrich approached it. Step, pause, step. The lantern's glow reached the cage. The wooden perch inside remained empty. A few loose feathers rested along the floor of the enclosure. Aldrich stopped. For a moment he simply looked inside. Then he lifted his gaze toward the perches. Above, 1, 2, 3. The ravens rested quietly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, 11, 12. All 12 remained there, exactly as they should. The cage door creaked softly once more. Aldrich closed it slowly, the iron latch settling back into place with a faint metallic click. He stepped back. The lantern light returned to the center of the chamber. The ravens breathed quietly. The tower remained calm. Aldrich resumed his slow walk. Step, pause, step. But as he passed the far window once more, he heard it again. Faint movement of air, a single quiet beat of wings, not from the perches, not from the cages, somewhere else. Somewhere in the tower itself. Aldrich stopped. The ravens did not stir. The lantern flame burned steadily, and for the briefest moment a shadow passed across the wall beside him. Not large, not sudden, just the faint outline of wings moving through the lantern light, before fading quietly back into the night. The tower remained quiet. After a time, the small movements of the ravens faded once more into stillness, and the chamber returned to the gentle rhythm it had held for many nights before. The lantern burned steadily upon the table, its flame small and patient, casting warm circles of light across the wooden floor and the curved stone walls. Outside the narrow windows, the night stretched over the forest like a dark and endless sea. Clouds drifted slowly across the hidden stars. A wind moved high above the castle towers, but inside the raven chamber, the air remained calm. Aldrich stood beside the lantern for a while. He did not rush his routine. There was never any reason to. The ravens had settled again upon their perches, their bodies relaxed, their feathers smooth against the quiet air of the chamber. A few of them blinked slowly as they watched him, their dark eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. Everything appeared as it should, and yet something lingered. Not a sound, not a movement, only a feeling, faint and distant, like the memory of something that had passed through the room only moments before. Aldrich lifted the lantern once more. The light swayed gently as he began another slow walk around the tower chamber. Step, pause, step. The wooden floor creaked faintly beneath his boots. The ravens remained still. Aldrich stopped beside the first perch. One raven rested there, its head tucked beneath its wing. Only the faint rise and fall of its feathers showed that it was awake at all. He moved on. Step, pause, step. At the second perch, another raven sat upright, watching him with calm eyes. It blinked slowly as he passed. Nothing unusual, nothing disturbed. The quiet felt complete. 3, 4, 5. The lantern's glow drifted across the chamber walls, catching the shapes of the wooden perches and the smooth curve of stone between the narrow windows. A feather stirred lightly upon the floor. 6, 7, 8. Aldrich continued along the circle of the chamber, his steps slow, steady, familiar. 9, 10, 11, and finally 12. He stopped again. For a moment, Aldrich stood in silence. The ravens rested quietly upon their perches. The lantern flame flickered softly. The wind outside the tower whispered faintly past the narrow windows. Everything was calm. Everything was still. And yet, as Aldrich turned to begin his walk again, one of the ravens lifted its head. Not suddenly, not with alarm, just slowly, its gaze moved past Aldrich, toward the far side of the chamber, toward the shadowed corner between two of the tower windows. Aldrich noticed the movement. He paused. The raven continued watching that empty space. Another bird shifted slightly on its perch. Then another. One by one, several of the ravens lifted their heads, not crying out, not spreading their wings, only watching. The same corner, the same quiet place where nothing stood. Aldrich did not move immediately. Instead, he listened. The tower remained silent. No wingbeats echoed through the chamber. No feathers rustled. A raven simply watched. Aldrich lifted the lantern slowly. The light swayed as he turned toward the corner. The glow spread across the floor, across the wooden perches, across the curved stone wall. Nothing stood there, only shadow, only the quiet shape of the tower. The ravens remained calm. After a moment, one of them lowered its head again. Another shifted its wings before settling back onto its perch. Gradually, the birds returned to rest. The moment passed. Aldrich lowered the lantern slightly. The light softened once more. Step, pause, step. He resumed his walk around the chamber. The ravens breathed quietly. The lantern flame burned steady. The tower returned to its gentle rhythm. But Aldrich passed beneath one of the narrow windows. Something brushed lightly against the air. Not wind, not feathers, something softer, almost too quiet to notice. He stopped. The lantern remained still in his hand. The ravens did not move. Aldrich listened carefully. For several long seconds, the chamber held its silence. And then, very softly, another sound, a single beat of wings, not from the perches, not from the cages, above him. Aldrich slowly lifted his gaze toward the ceiling beams that crossed the upper chamber. The lantern light followed. The wooden beams rested quietly above, dark shapes against the curved stone of the tower ceiling. Nothing moved. The shadows remained still. Aldrich lowered the lantern again. Perhaps it had been only the wind. Perhaps the sound had carried through one of the narrow windows. The tower had always been full of small sounds like that. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth troubling the quiet. He resumed his slow walk. Step, pause, step. The ravens watched him calmly. Aldrich passed the perches once more. 1, 2, 3. Everything in place. 4, 5, 6. The lantern light drifted across the chamber walls. 7, 8, 9. The tower felt peaceful again. 10, 11, 12. Aldrich stopped beside the final perch. For a moment, he remained still. The ravens rested quietly. The lantern flame flickered gently. And then, from somewhere above the chamber, a soft movement stirred the air. A single loose feather drifted slowly downward. Aldrich watched it fall. The feather turned gently as it descended, moving through the lantern's warm glow, before settling quietly upon the wooden floor. None of the ravens had moved. None had spread their wings. The feather lay still. Aldrich remained silent for a moment longer. Then he lowered the lantern and continued his slow walk around the chamber. Step, pause, step. The tower returned to stillness. The ravens rested. The wind moved softly beyond the windows. But somewhere high within the shadows above the chamber, something had unfolded its wings, and it remained there, quietly watching as the keeper walked his rounds below. The night continued its slow passage over Blackwood Castle. Time within the walls did not move quickly at such an hour. The courtyards rested in silence. The towers stood up moving beneath the dark sky, and the forest beyond the walls stretched endlessly into shadow. High above it all, the Raven Tower remained awake. Inside the round chamber, the lantern burned with a smaller flame now. Its light had softened, casting long, quiet shadows across the wooden floor and the curved stone walls of the tower. The ravens rested upon their perches. Most had tucked their heads beneath their wings again, returning to the gentle stillness that came naturally to them during the quiet hours of the night. Their breathing rose and fell slowly, blending into the calm air of the chamber. Only a few watched. Aldrich walked his slow circle around the tower room once more. Pause. Step. The wooden floor creaked faintly beneath his boots, a sound so familiar it seemed part of the tower itself. The lantern swayed gently in his hand, its glow moving softly from perch to perch. Nothing seemed disturbed, nothing had changed. And yet, Aldrich could not entirely forget the feather that had fallen from the shadows above. He had seen many feathers fall before. The tower was full of them. They drifted from perches, from wings, from the quiet movements of the birds. But this feather had come from somewhere higher, somewhere above the beams. Aldrich paused beside the small wooden table at the center of the chamber. The lantern rested there for a moment while he looked upward again. The beams crossed the tower ceiling like dark lines against the stone above. They had always been there, holding the roof steady through wind and rain and many long winters. Nothing moved among them. The shadows rested quietly. Aldrich lowered his gaze. Perhaps it had been nothing at all. The night had a way of carrying small sounds and movements through the tower. He lifted the lantern once more. Step, pause, step. He continued along the curved wall of the chamber. One raven shifted slightly as he passed. Another blinked slowly before settling again into sleep. The routine remained calm. Aldrich stopped beside the first cage along the wall. It was an 12 for cages used regularly. Most of the ravens preferred the open perches, and the cages were rarely closed, except when a bird had been injured or newly brought to the tower. Still, Aldrich checked them each night. The cage door hung slightly open. He reached out and touched the iron latch gently. The metal felt cool beneath his fingers. Inside the cage, the small wooden perch remained empty. A few scattered feathers rested along the floor. Nothing unusual. He closed the cage door softly and continued. Step, pause, step. The lantern glow followed him along the curved wall, revealing the other cages in turn. Each one stood empty. Each one remained quiet. Aldrich moved slowly past them. Then he stopped. Near the far side of the chamber, tucked between two narrow windows, stood another cage. This one looked older. The wood was darker, worn more deeply by time. Aldrich had not used this cage in many years. Few people even noticed it anymore. It had belonged to a raven long gone from the tower. The bird had died many winters ago, after many years of faithful flights between the castle and distant lands. Aldrich remembered the bird well. It had been larger than most ravens. Its feathers had shone with a strange silver sheen in the lantern light. When it had died, Aldrich had left the cage closed, not out of sadness, simply because it felt right to leave it that way. He stepped closer now. Step, pause, step. The lantern light reached the cage slowly. The wooden bars cast thin shadows across the floor. Aldrich stopped. For a moment, he simply looked at it. The cage door was open, not wide, just enough for a bird to pass through. Aldrich frowned slightly. He was certain he had closed it long ago. He reached forward and lifted the lantern. The light spread across the inside of the cage. The small perch remained there. The floor lay empty. No feathers, no movement, only quiet space. Aldrich stood for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently pushed the cage door closed again. The iron latch settled into place with a soft metallic sound. The lantern flickered slightly as he stepped back. The ravens upon the perches remained calm. None had stirred. None seemed troubled by the old cage. The lantern glow drifted across the floor once more. The ravens breathed quietly. Everything returned to its familiar rhythm. But as Aldrich reached the far window, one of the birds lifted its head again, its eyes fixed upon the old cage. Aldrich noticed. He stopped. The raven did not cry out. It did not spread its wings. It simply watched. Another raven shifted slightly on its perch, then another. One by one, several birds turned their heads toward the same place, toward the cage Aldrich had just closed. The lantern flame flickered softly. Aldrich remained still. The tower held its silence. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. And yet, after several quiet seconds, something happened. The cage door moved. Very slowly, almost too gently to notice, the iron latch lifted. The wooden door creaked open, just a little, then a little more, until once again the old cage stood open. Aldrich did not step forward. He did not rush. Instead, he simply watched. The ravens remained calm. They did not cry out. They did not leave their perches. They simply watched the open cage. The lantern flame swayed gently. Aldrich listened. No wingbeats, no feathers moving. Nothing entered the cage. Nothing left it. And yet, as he looked into the quiet darkness within, he had the strange feeling that the cage was no longer empty, not filled with movement, not filled with sound, but with something softer, something unseen. Aldrich remained still for a long moment. Then slowly, he turned away. Step, pause, step. The lantern light moved across the chamber once more. The ravens settled again upon their perches. The wind whispered outside the tower windows. Behind him, the old cage remained open. And within the quiet darkness of the tower, something had returned to its place. The night held its silence over Blackwood Castle. Far below the tower, the courtyards lay empty beneath the dim sky. The great gates remained closed. The guards walked slowly along the distant walls, and the forest beyond the stone boundaries stretched endlessly into darkness. Within the Raven Tower, the lantern burned low. Its small flame flickered gently, casting warm circles of light across the wooden floor and the curved stone walls. The shadows between the perches remained soft and unmoving, resting comfortably within the quiet chamber. The ravens had settled again. Most slept. A few watched. Their dark shapes rested along the circular row of wooden perches, feathers smooth and undisturbed. From time to time one shifted slightly, rustling its wings, before returning to stillness. Aldrich walked his slow path round the chamber. Step, pause, step. His boots touched the worn wooden floor with a soft rhythm that had long become part of the tower's quiet life. He did not hurry. There was no need. Each night followed the same pattern. Check the perches, check the cages, listen to the wind, count the birds. Routine had a way of settling everything. Aldrich passed the first perch. One raven rested there, its head tucked beneath its wing. He continued. Step, pause, step. At the second perch, another bird watched him calmly. Its dark eyes reflected the lantern's glow, before slowly closing again. 3, 4, 5. The chamber remained peaceful. 6, 7, 8. The lantern light drifted softly across the walls, touching the edges of the wooden beams and the narrow windows where the night pressed gently against the tower. 9, 10, 11. Aldrich reached the final perch. 12. He paused for a moment. The ravens remained calm. Nothing disturbed them. Everything appeared as it should. And yet, the old cage behind him remained open. Aldrich turned slightly, his gaze drifting toward it. The cage stood quietly beside the tower wall. The door still hung open. The lantern's glow reached it only faintly now, leaving most of its interior in shadow. Nothing moved there. Nothing had entered. Nothing had left. After a moment, Aldrich resumed his slow walk. Step, pause, step. The lantern swayed gently as he crossed the chamber once more. The ravens breathed quietly. The wind whispered softly outside the tower windows. Everything remained still. Until Aldrich noticed something. He slowed, not because of a sound, not because of movement. but because something within the quiet rhythm of the chamber had changed. He lifted the lantern slightly. The light spread across the floor between the perches. There, in the narrow space between two of the wooden stands, something stood, a raven, not upon a perch, not within a cage, just standing there upon the wooden floor, still, calm. Aldrich stopped. The lantern remained steady in his hand. The raven did not move. It stood with its wings folded neatly against its body, its dark feathers smoothed beneath the lantern light, its head tilted slightly as it looked toward Aldrich. Aldrich remained silent. He knew every raven in the tower. Each bird had its place. Each bird had its perch. But this one did not belong there. The cages remained closed. None of the perches were empty. And yet, the raven stood quietly between them, as though it had always been there. Aldrich lifted the lantern a little higher. The light spread across the bird's feathers. They looked darker than the others, almost absorbing the glow, rather than reflecting it. The raven did not step forward. It did not spread its wings. It simply watched him, calm, silent, present. Aldrich slowly turned his gaze toward the perches. 1, 2, 3. Each raven remained where it had been before. 4, 5, 6. None had moved. 7, 8, 9. The chamber held its quiet. 10, 11, 12. All 12 birds rested upon their perches. Aldrich lowered the lantern slightly. The raven on the floor remained where it stood, unchained, uncaged, not restless, not afraid, just present. After a moment, Aldrich resumed his walk. Step, pause, step. He passed beside the raven. The bird did not move. Its gaze followed him quietly as he walked by. The lantern's glow moved ahead of him, leaving the raven behind in deeper shadow. Aldrich reached the far side of the chamber. He turned slowly. The lantern light drifted back across the floor. The space between the perches lay empty. The raven was gone. Aldrich did not react quickly. Instead, he simply stood there for a moment. The ravens upon the perches remained calm. None had stirred. None had spread their wings. The chamber held its quiet rhythm. Step, pause, step. Aldrich resumed his slow walk again. He passed the old cage once more. The door remained open. The interior remained dark. The lantern's glow reached only the edge of its wooden frame. Aldrich moved past it. The ravens rested quietly. The tower remained peaceful. But as he continued along the circle of the chamber, something changed again. Not ahead of him, not behind him, but beside him, a softness in the air, a quiet presence, moving with the same slow rhythm as his own steps. Step, pause, step. Aldrich did not turn. He did not raise the lantern. He continued walking exactly as before. Step, pause, step. And though the tower remained silent, though the ravens remained calm, though the night outside continued its slow passing, Aldrich knew something had changed. The chamber was no longer empty between the perches. The old cage was no longer the only open place within the tower. Because now, as the keeper walked his quiet rounds, something unseen walked with him, silent, steady, keeping the same slow rhythm of the night. The night continued its slow passage over Blackwood Castle. Ever beyond the stone walls, the forest stretched across the hills and valleys, like a dark sea of branches. The wind moved softly through the trees, stirring leaves and bending the high limbs that caught the quiet breath of the night. But within the castle grounds, very little moved. The towers stood unmoving beneath the clouded sky. The courtyards remained empty. The faint glow of the guard lanterns drifted slowly along the distant battlements. before fading once more into shadow. High above the courtyard, the Raven Tower remained awake. Inside the round chamber, the lantern flame burned smaller than before. Its light flickered gently against the stone walls, painting soft patterns that moved slowly with each faint breath of air passing through the narrow windows. The ravens rested quietly. Most remained asleep upon their perches, their feathers smooth and undisturbed. Their breathing rose and fell softly, blending into the calm atmosphere of the chamber. Only a few watched. Aldrich walked his slow circle through the tower. Step, pause, step. The wooden floor creaked faintly beneath his boots. The lantern swayed gently in his hand. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing had changed. And yet, the quiet presence that had begun earlier in the night had not left the tower. It remained, not visible, not moving, but present, keeping pace with the slow rhythm of Aldrich's walk. Step, pause, step. Aldrich passed the first perch. The raven resting there did not stir. He continued. Step, pause, step. At the second perch, another bird blinked slowly before tucking its head beneath its wing once more. 3, 4, 5. The chamber remained calm. 6, 7, 8. The lantern light drifted across the wooden beams above. 9, 10, 11. Aldrich reached the final perch. 12. He paused for a moment. The ravens remained quiet. The tower breathed softly. The wind outside whispered faintly against the stone walls. Everything seemed unchanged. But as Aldrich resumed his walk again, something reached his senses. Not sound, not movement, something softer. A scent, faint, almost lost beneath the familiar smell of feathers and straw that always filled the Raven Tower. Aldrich slowed. He drew a quiet breath. There it was again. Damp earth, cool and distant, the scent of the forest. Aldrich lifted his gaze slightly toward the tower windows. The wind outside continued its gentle movement through the trees beyond the castle walls. But the descent felt stronger than the wind should have carried. It lingered in the chamber, soft, unmistakable. Aldrich continued walking. Step, pause, step. He passed the perches once more. One raven lifted its head slightly. Another shifted its wings. But none showed alarm. None cried out. They remained calm, and yet they seemed aware. One bird turned its head slowly toward the open window above. Another looked toward the shadows between the perches. Aldrich moved slowly toward the nearest window. Pause. Step. The lantern light reached the stone wall beneath it. Outside the narrow opening, the night stretched endlessly across the forest. Nothing moved. The trees stood quietly beneath the dark sky. The wind brushed through the branches with a soft whisper, but the scent remained. Damp soil, cold leaves, fresh earth. As though something from the forest had passed through the tower. Aldrich stood there for a moment, listening. The ravens remained silent. No wings moved. No feathers rustled. And yet, one of the birds shifted again. It leaned slightly away from its perch, not in fear, not in alarm, but as though making space. Aldrich noticed. He turned slowly. The lantern light moved gently across the chamber. The ravens watched. Not him, but something near him, something that stood between the perches. Aldrich lowered the lantern slightly. The glow softened. The space between the perches remained empty. Nothing stood there. Nothing moved. And yet, the scent of the forest grew slightly stronger. Aldrich walked again. Step, pause, step. The presence beside him remained, unseen, silent, keeping pace. He reached the far side of the chamber. The old cage remained open beside the tower wall. Its wooden door hung slightly outward, unmoving. Aldrich stopped beside it. The lantern light drifted across its interior, empty, still, but the scent seemed strongest here. As though something had passed through the cage itself, Aldrich looked slowly around the chamber. The ravens remained calm, their breathing steady, their feathers undisturbed. Nothing had entered the tower, nothing had left, and yet something had come, something that carried with it the scent of distant forest earth. Aldrich stepped away from the cage. Step, pause, step. The lantern swayed gently. The ravens watched quietly. Aldrich resumed his slow walk. Step, pause, step. The chamber remained peaceful. The wind whispered outside. The lantern flame flickered softly, but as Aldrich passed the first perch once more, one of the ravens opened its eyes, not fully, just enough. Its gaze followed him slowly. Then, very gently, it leaned away again, not from Aldrich, from the quiet space beside him, as though something stood there. Something that belonged not to the tower, not to the castle, but to the forest beyond the walls. Aldrich continued his walk. Step, pause, step. The ravens breathed quietly. The lantern burned low. The scent of damp earth lingered in the air. And though nothing had entered the tower, though nothing had passed through its door, something from the forest had found its way inside. Something that moved quietly beside the keeper, something the ravens could see, even if he could not. The night rested gently over Blackwood Castle. Nothing within the walls disturbed the quiet that had settled over the sleeping halls and courtyards. The towers rose like dark shapes against the clouded sky, their stones holding the cool breath of the late hours. Beyond the walls, the forest waited. Its endless rows of trees stood unmoving beneath the dim sky, their branches tangled together in quiet darkness. From time to time, wind moved softly through them, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. That scent had reached the tower. It lingered there still. Inside the raven chamber, the lantern burned low. Its flame had grown smaller now, steady and patient, casting a warm circle of light across the wooden floor and the quiet shapes of the perches along the walls. The ravens remained calm. Most had returned to sleep, their heads tucked beneath their wings. A few still watched from their resting places, their dark eyes reflecting faint glimmers of lantern light. Aldrich continued his slow walk around the chamber. Step, pause, step. His boots touched the wooden floor with the same gentle rhythm that had filled the tower for many years. Nothing had changed in his routine, nothing needed to, and yet the tower did not feel quite the same. The scent of the forest remained in the air. The quiet presence beside him remained, unseen, silent, keeping the same slow rhythm as his own steps. Step, pause, step. Aldrich passed the perches once more. 1, 2, 3. The ravens rested quietly. 4, 5, 6. The lantern light drifted across the chamber walls. 7, 8, 9. The tower remained peaceful. 10, 11, 12. Aldrich paused again near the center of the chamber. The lantern flame flickered gently. The ravens breathed quietly. The scent of damp earth lingered faintly in the air, and above him, something caught his attention. A small wooden ladder rested against the curved wall near one of the narrow windows. It had been there for many years. Few people used it anymore. The ladder led upward to a small loft space above the chamber beams. Long ago, the tower keepers had stored feed and supplies there, but over time, the space had been forgotten. Aldrich had not climbed it in many seasons. He lifted the lantern slightly and looked upward. The ladder reached toward a dark opening between the beams. The loft above remained hidden in shadow. Nothing moved there. but the feather that had fallen earlier in the night had come from somewhere above. Aldrich stood quietly for a moment. Then he moved toward the ladder. Step, pause, step. The lantern light followed him. The ravens watched calmly from their perches. None cried out, none spread their wings. Aldrich placed the lantern on a nearby ledge and rested one hand upon the ladder. The wood felt smooth and worn beneath his fingers. Slowly, he began to climb. Step, pause, step. The ladder creaked faintly beneath his weight. The lantern light rose with him as he lifted it again, casting soft shadows along the beams above. The opening of the loft came closer. The air grew slightly cooler there. Aldrich reached the top. He lifted the lantern into the small space above the chamber. The loft remained quiet. Old wooden boards stretched across the beams, forming a narrow floor above the tower room. Dust rested lightly along the edges, disturbed only by time and the occasional movement of air through the tower. Aldrich stepped onto the boards. The lantern light spread slowly across the loft. Old sacks lay stacked against one wall. A few broken wooden crates rested nearby. Feathers were scattered across the floor, more than there should have been. Aldrich moved slowly through the narrow space. Step, pause, step. The loft remained silent. No wings stirred. No birds rested there. And yet, something had been there recently. The feathers were fresh. Not dusty. Not old. Aldrich crouched slightly and lifted one of them. It was larger than most raven feathers. Dark, smooth, almost shining beneath the lantern light. He lowered it gently. The loft remained still. But then, something else caught his attention. Near the far end of the loft rested an old wooden perch. Aldrich remembered it faintly. Long ago, one of the tower ravens had preferred to sleep there, high above the chamber, where the air was cooler. But that bird had died many years ago. The perch had remained empty ever since. Aldrich stepped closer. Step, pause, step. The lantern light reached the perch. Something rested upon it. A feather, fresh, black, unmistakably new. Aldrich stood quietly for a moment. He looked around the loft again. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. The air remained calm. The ravens below remained quiet. And yet, someone had been there, or something. Aldrich turned slowly and began climbing back down the ladder. Step, pause, step. The chamber below returned into view. The ravens remained calm upon their perches. The lantern glow settled once more across the wooden floor. Aldrich stepped down from the ladder. The tower returned to its quiet rhythm. Pause. Step. He resumed his slow walk around the chamber. The ravens breathed quietly. The scent of the forest remained faint in the air, and though the loft above now lay empty, Aldrich knew something had rested there, something that had unfolded its wings and had quiet darkness above the tower, something that had not yet left. Because as Aldrich passed between the perches once more, he felt the same presence beside him again, silent, steady, keeping pace, as though the unseen raven of the loft had followed him down into the chamber and now walked the tower with its keeper. The night remained calm over Blackwood Castle. High clouds drifted slowly across the dark sky, hiding the stars and softening the light that touched the tall towers and stone walls. Beyond the castle grounds, the forest stretched into shadow, its endless trees standing still beneath the quiet sky. Inside the castle, nearly everything had fallen into sleep. The great hall fires had faded to faint embers. The guards along the walls moved slowly beneath dim lantern light. Even the wind had grown softer now, passing gently along the towers before disappearing again into the night. High above the courtyard, the Raven Tower remained awake in the circular chamber. The lantern burned low upon the wooden table. A small flame flickered patiently, casting warm golden light across the curved stone walls and the wooden floor between the perches. The ravens rested. Most had tucked their heads beneath their wings, their bodies still and calm in the quiet chamber. Only a few remained awake, their dark eyes half open as they watched the slow movements of the keeper. Aldrich walked his usual path through the tower. Pause. Step. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath his boots. The lantern swayed gently in his hand. Everything appeared calm. Everything appeared unchanged. And yet, the quiet presence that had followed him through the tower for much of the night remained beside him still, unseen, silent, but no longer unfamiliar. Step. Pause. Step. Aldrich passed the first perch. The raven resting there did not move. He continued. Step. Pause. Step. The lantern light drifted across the chamber. The ravens breathed quietly. Nothing disturbed the tower, but as Aldrich reached the center of the room, something changed. One of the ravens lifted its head. The movement was slow and gentle, as though the bird had awakened from a deep and peaceful sleep. It did not look toward Aldrich. Instead, its gaze moved past him, toward the empty space beside him. Aldrich slowed. The raven continued watching. Another bird stirred, then another. One by one, several ravens lifted their heads beneath their wings, not crying out, not spreading their wings, only watching. The same quiet place, the air beside Aldrich. Aldrich stopped walking. The lantern flame flickered softly. The ravens remained calm. Their eyes followed something unseen as it moved beside the keeper. Aldrich did not turn. He simply listened. The tower remained silent. The wind whispered faintly through the narrow windows. No wings stirred, no feathers rustled, and yet the birds continued watching, their heads turning slowly as Aldrich resumed his walk. Step, pause, step. The ravens followed with their gaze. Not toward him, but toward the quiet presence beside him. Step, pause, step. Aldrich passed the old cage. The raven resting inside remained still upon its perch. Its dark feathers fell gently with each slow breath. The lantern light brushed across the cage door before drifting onward. The ravens upon the perches continued watching. Step, pause, step. Aldrich reached the far side of the chamber. He paused there for a moment. Slowly, one by one, the ravens lowered their heads again. Some returned to sleep. Others simply watched quietly. The tower grew still again. Aldrich resumed his slow walk. Step, pause, step. But one raven near the window remained awake. It leaned forward slightly upon its perch. Its gaze remained fixed upon the empty air beside Aldrich. The bird tilted its head gently, as though studying something only it could see. Aldrich slowed. The lantern flame flickered softly. The raven watched carefully. Then, very slowly, it stepped down from its perch. The bird landed softly upon the wooden floor. Its claws touched the boards without sound. It walked slowly toward Aldrich. Step, pause, step. The raven stopped a short distance away, its eyes lifted, looking not at Aldrich, but at the unseen space beside him. The bird tilted its head once more. Then, gently, it lowered its body. The raven settled upon the floor, not beside Aldrich, but beside the quiet presence that walked with him. The lantern flame flickered once. The raven remained calm. After a moment, it closed its eyes, as though it had chosen a place to rest. Beside a familiar companion, Aldrich stood quietly. The chamber held its silence. The other ravens slept upon their perches. The lantern burned low. and beside the keeper, the unseen presence remained silent, steady, accepted by the birds of the tower, as though it had always belonged there, as though the ravens had simply been waiting for it to return. The night had grown very still around Blackwood Castle. The wind that had passed through the forest earlier had faded, leaving the tall trees beyond the castle walls standing quietly beneath the dim sky. The towers rose dark and unmoving above the sleeping courtyards, their stones holding the cool breath of the late hours. Within the Raffin Tower, the lantern burned low. Its small flame flickered softly upon the wooden table, casting warm light across the curved walls and the quiet rows of perches where the ravens rested. Most of the birds slept. Their feathers lay smooth and undisturbed, their breathing slow and calm in the peaceful chamber. Aldrich walked his familiar path through the tower. Step, pause, step. The wooden floor creaked gently beneath his boots. The lantern swayed softly in his hand. Everything felt quiet. Everything felt as it always had. And yet, the keeper was no longer alone. The unseen presence that had walked beside him for much of the night remained there still, silent, steady, keeping the same slow rhythm of his steps. Pause, step. Aldrich passed the first perch. The raven resting there did not stir. He continued walking. Step, pause, step. The lantern light drifted across the chamber floor. Another raven blinked slowly before returning to sleep. 3, 4, 5. The tower remained calm. 6, 7, 8. Aldrich moved slowly along the circle of the chamber. 9, 10, 11. He reached the final perch. 12. He paused. For a moment, the lantern remained still in his hand. The chamber held its quiet breath. Then Aldrich lowered the lantern slightly. The warm glow spread across the wooden floor between the perches, and there, within the soft edge of the light, something appeared, not suddenly, not sharply, but gently, a shape, low and quiet. A raven. Its form rested upon the floor beside Aldrich. Its feathers were dark, darker even than the others in the tower, almost absorbing the lantern's glow rather than reflecting it. Its wings lay folded neatly against its body. The bird lifted its head slowly, its eyes opened, calm, watchful. The raven looked toward Aldrich. For a long moment, neither moved. The lantern flame flickered softly. The other ravens remained asleep upon their perches. The tower held its stillness. Then the bird lowered its head slightly, not in fear, not in caution, but in quiet recognition. Aldrich remained where he stood. The moment passed gently between them. After a time, the raven rose from the floor. It did not spread its wings. It did not fly. Instead, it began to walk slowly across the wooden boards. Step, pause, step. The lantern light followed the bird softly as it moved toward the old cage beside the tower wall. The cage door remained open, just as it had been earlier in the night. The raven stopped before it. For a moment it stood still, then it stepped inside. The bird climbed onto the small perch within the cage. Its feathers settled quietly. Its wings folded gently against its sides. The lantern flame flickered once. The chamber remained silent. Aldrich watched for a moment longer. The raven rested calmly inside the cage, as though it had always belonged there, as though the tower had simply waited for its return. After a time, Aldrich turned. Step, pause, step. He resumed his slow walk around the chamber. The ravens upon the perches remained peaceful. None cried out. None stirred. The lantern swayed gently in his hand. And behind him, within the old cage, beside the tower wall, the raven that had once been missing from the tower rested quietly again. The one who had been gone for many seasons, had returned to its place. The final hours of night rested over Blackwood Castle. The wind had faded completely now, leaving the forest beyond the castle walls, standing silent beneath the dim sky. The towers rose dark against the clouds, their stones holding the cool stillness that came before dawn. Within the castle, nothing stirred. The great halls slept, the courtyards remained empty. Only the distant lanterns of the guards moved slowly along far walls before disappearing again into shadow. High above the quiet courtyard, the Raven Tower remained awake. Inside the round chamber, the lantern burned with a small, steady flame. Its glow rested softly across the wooden floor and the curved stone walls, touching each perch in turn where the ravens slept. Most of the birds had popped their heads beneath their wings once more. Their breathing rose and it fell slowly, soft, steady, peaceful. Aldrich walked his slow circle through the chamber. Step, pause, step. The rhythm of his boots upon the floor remained calm and familiar. It had not changed through all the hours of the night. The lantern swayed gently in his hand. The ravens rested. The tower breathed quietly. Step, pause, step. Aldrich passed the first perch. The raven there remained asleep. He continued. Step, pause, step. The lantern light drifted across the chamber floor. 3, 4, 5. The tower remained calm. 6, 7, 8. Aldrich walked slowly along the circular path. 9, 10, 11. He reached the final perch. 12. He paused there for a moment. The lantern flame flickered softly. The chamber held its quiet. Then Aldrich turned his gaze toward the old cage beside the tower wall. The door remained open. The lantern light reached gently inside. And there, resting calmly upon the small wooden perch, was the raven. The bird remained still. Its feathers lay smooth against the warm glow of the lantern. Its breathing rose and fell slowly. For a moment, the raven opened its eyes. It looked toward Aldrich, not with alarm, not with curiosity, only with calm recognition. Then it lowered its head again and returned to rest. Aldrich watched for a moment. The tower remained silent. The other ravens slept upon their perches. Nothing disturbed the quiet. After a time, Aldrich resumed his walk. Step, pause, step. The lantern light moved across the chamber once more. The ravens continued sleeping. The tower remained peaceful. But as Aldrich walked, the quiet presence beside him remained. No longer unseen, no longer uncertain, simply there, as natural to the tower as the birds upon the perches. Step, pause, step. Aldrich passed the cage once more. The raven inside rested peacefully. The lantern flame burned low. Outside the tower windows, the sky had begun to grow slightly lighter. Dawn would come soon. The ravens would wake. The tower would fill again with the soft sounds of wings. But for now, the night still held the tower in its calm embrace. Aldrich reached the center of the chamber and paused. He listened. The wind moved faintly outside. The ravens breathed quietly, and beside him, the gentle presence remained, not following, not watching, simply sharing the quiet rhythm of the tower. After a moment, Aldrich resumed his final round before dawn. Step, pause, step. He no longer counted the birds. Some things did not need to be counted. Some things simply returned and remained. The lantern burned low. The ravens slept. The castle rested. And as the keeper walked his final quiet circle through the tower, the silence beside him was no longer empty. Now, the keeper was not alone. Step, pause, step. The night ended gently, and everything had found its place once more.